Let me ask you another question. Has any organization proven to be as effective as Watchtower at influencing the death of Jehovah's Witnesses? Nazis in Germany, Soviets in Russia, anyone? You know that Watchtower policies when it comes to blood, shunning, and abuse reporting are literally killing people. Okay.
Searching.
But aren't the numbers of witnesses in this country dropping in the last service here? Aren't there fewer Jehovah's Witnesses in Canada than there was before?
I don't know. I haven't read the latest stats.
Oh no, the 2017 yearbook.
Some stats show that. Yeah, that's true.
And there are people.
Yet you're saying that these stands are having success?
To a large extent, and it's worldwide, right?
From 2017, and put them in a room with a Bible student from 1917. That would be an interesting conversation.
Well, it would be. Yeah.
How many times would that? We're just talking about if you took one of Jehovah's Witnesses from 2017 and put them in a room with a Bible student from 1917, what that conversation would look like, right? Like how many times would that brother or sister from 2017 have to tell the Bible student, actually, no, we don't believe that anymore.
Well, something. Yeah.
We don't. That's not what that means anymore. Actually, we shun those people now. Actually, we disfellowship those people now.
Well,
it'd be an interesting conversation.
Things are always changing, aren't they? Everything.
Well, I thought God is the same forever.
Maybe your light is getting brighter and brighter.
My light is getting.
The
what
light
do you mean?
is getting brighter. We understand things better. Just like with the apostles, they didn't understand things fully at one time. And
Well, they didn't understand things, but they didn't teach them as requirements for life. Where if you didn't meet them, you'd be punished for not meeting them. That's a bit of a different story with your leaders.
Well, you sound like you've talked to witnesses before, obviously, and I think you're trying to just get us going, or Oh.
What do you mean, get you going?
Well, anyways,
I'm presenting some reasonings, some Bible-based reasonings to you that you're not really going to hear in a Kingdom Hall or in the pages of your Watchtower. Why can't I have?
You can call in my house and talk to me.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, we're standing here. You've got us here. I can see what you're doing, and you know what?
What?
I'm going on a break.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you enjoy your coffee break. Yeah, I'll keep talking. Yeah, it's amazing. And just thinking about some of the controversies that are sort of developing in the news these days. Is that just misrepresentations? People coming forward to make those accusations.
Which one specifically? I don't know.
Well, that your two-witness rule is making it possible for pedophiles to go unreported to the authorities.
Wow, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah. You haven't heard about that?
Well, I've heard of ones in the past, not something recent.
The $60+ million lawsuit being filed in Quebec? Class action lawsuit? You know how many people have to come with complaints for a class action lawsuit to be filed? A lot of people. Lawyers won't take it on. And $60+ million? Is that Satan just ramping up his attacks on Jehovah's Witnesses, lying about them?
I don't know. It could be. It really could be. It really could be.
You don't know.
Well,
about that lawsuit? If that's Satan or if it's
specifically
true?
that lawsuit, I have not heard it my own. But I've heard about. But I think a couple of years ago, I heard about something else, something specific.
How you guys doing? Pretty good. It's cool if I take something to read for the bus trip. Okay. Yeah.
What do you think of that question?
That's a great question. Yeah, I haven't seen the literature for a while. I used to study the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
We have a website now. It's jw.org website. There's millions of pages there. It's a new feature. It's been around for a while, a little bit now.
I interrupted your conversation in case I want to have a conversation. You don't want me to have a conversation. You want me to go right to the website.
Oh, no, that's not the reason.
Come on.
No.
You jumped on me with go to jw.org if you have any questions. Can I not ask you guys if I have a question?
Sure you can.
Oh. Yeah, no, not a question. I used to study the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
And it was a really positive experience. I think I learned things studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses a person isn't going to learn anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was about 18 when I started studying.
Okay.
So it really influenced my view of the world and people and how to be a more informed person from a young age.
Yeah.
And I think I've been kind of a tough nut to crack ever since because of how satisfying the answers were at the time.
Yeah.
Like I'll never forget the first meeting I went to. The couple that I had been studying with, they were they were picking me up at home, bringing me to their home to study with them, and then bringing me to school.
Yeah.
So they were going out of their way for me.
Like, we really are a family in our congregation, so it's a,
right.
it's a big deal when, you know, someone comes in.
When did y'all get the truth?
I was raised in the truth.
Okay.
I was baptized when I was 13, and so and my parents were also raised in the truth.
Oh, so that makes you a second generation, I guess?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
What about yourself? When were you raised?
My parents got baptized when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, and I got baptized at 14.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice
so
one.
It's been a while too, I guess. For me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard. Like, we have to make the truth our own, especially at a young age. Like, everyone has to make that choice at the end.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I got baptized when I was 24. So I started studying when I was 18. I had other stuff going on, and then when I turned 24, it was time, I guess. Yeah. But other stuff going on, and then when I turned 24, it was time, I guess. Yeah. But then, you know, I kind of had a problem with some of the things that I was learning. Like I was saying, like I'm a tough nut to crack. I like to do a lot of research. So I kept discovering that what, according to Watchtower, the Bible was really teaching wasn't what it always used to really teach. And I kept discovering that like 8, 9, 10 times. So then I had to ask myself, okay, well, it certainly feels good to feel like I belong in a congregation and to be making friends for life and to feel like I'm a true Christian standing out in a world of blinded unbelievers. It feels good. It feels good to get dressed up and come to a Kingdom Hall and have my Watchtower ready and reach out and be an auxiliary pioneer, then a regular pioneer, and fast forward 5, 10 years. I like my chances of surviving Armageddon. I like my chances of being able to greet people in the resurrection. But back up a second. Is what I believe really true? So I started thinking, is something true because more and more people believe it and spread it and translate it and feel good about doing it? Or is something true because it proves to be as true tomorrow as it did today and the day before? And unfortunately, I wasn't able to say that about what Jehovah's Witnesses teach.
Right. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
So is that how you feel now?
Absolutely, that's how I feel now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not studying anymore?
Definitely not studying anymore.
Yeah.
Are you a witness?
I am.
That's awesome. Oh, you're keeping an eye. You get to do. Are you counting time? You can count time now. Yeah. That is so perfect. Yeah.
No.
Are you pioneering?
No.
It's nice to meet you. I'm going on my break, so.
You're going on your break. That's
I
great.
am,
Yeah.
yes.
Where do you guys go for your breaks? Is there a Starbucks around here?
No, it's Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons. Okay. Yeah.
You're familiar with the idea that knowledge is progressive, right? We don't know everything all at once.
Okay.
And that's what you've experienced. Like when I took the truth, we studied the truth book.
Right.
And we had...
When you took the truth, you studied the truth book.
Yeah.
Well, then you must have
I
had
was only
the truth.
17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, she said she was baptized at 14. She said she was baptized.
Yeah, I was noticing that. I like to ask brothers and sisters
I
about
came
when they
from the
got
world.
baptized. Yeah, me too.
Not raised in the truth,
Nice one.
but got baptized at 17. But the truth has always basically been the same as far as basic understanding. There is no hellfire.
Every witness explains this differently. Anyway, go ahead.
There is no hellfire.
Uh-huh.
The soul is not immortal.
Okay.
All good people do not.
That's a nice checklist you got going there. You know there's a checklist of things that Jehovah's Witnesses didn't meet them, you'd be punished.
Yeah.
You'd be shunned, you'd be disfellowshipped, you'd have privileges of service taken away,
So
you
still haven't
wouldn't be
answered
able to
my
do this.
question. What are you
Go
doing?
ahead.
Are you a Jehovah's Witness or not?
What am I doing? I'm having a conversation with a couple of sincere
but
Bible
you're
students.
disfellowships. Or it might as well be.
Wait a minute. Okay. You asked me what I'm doing.
Yeah. But you're not. You're being
I just
very
told you.
evasive.
Hold on a second. You really do keep interrupting me.
I know, and I'm done. I really am.
Yeah.
The Bible says not to speak with
You
anybody like
asked me what I'm doing.
Could you just give me a better review?
I said I am speaking to people who are similarly sincere about their study of the Bible.
But you're sowing seeds of doubt deliberately. You're not inquiring about truth. You said you said you were baptized. How many years ago?
What does that mean? What's your point?
How many years ago were you baptized?
No, back up. What?
No,
I'm
no.
sowing seeds of doubt. I'm not being upfront.
Absolutely.
What does that mean?
What times it said it was going to come.
Yeah.
So what do you call that? Seeds
I
of-
call that giving you an opportunity to defend the reason for the hope you have.
I've looked at all those things, and it's
That's
no
one thing
different
I've
than the
noticed.
apostles.
Well, I'm just telling you that it is different from the apostles. The apostles didn't
Well, that's
teach
your
first century
view.
Christians that if they didn't meet those requirements for life, they would face consequences. The way you guys are
Who makes that
facing
decision? Who makes the
consequences.
decisions about who follows the requirements of life? It's not me. It's not my wife. It's not any Jehovah's Witness. It's Jehovah. And
It's
we only have
Jehovah
that
himself.
standard. That's it. So we leave it with him. But I also
So-
know that this is also a standard that's being violated. If you're talking to me, 'cause the Bible says to
Excuse
not
me?
speak with a person like you. Pushing ahead.
You're jumping around. You're jumping
No,
around.
I'm not.
You are jumping around.
No.
No. You talked about God being the one responsible for the requirements for
Who
life.
makes the final decision? Who makes it?
Who makes the final decision?
Yeah, one of Jehovah's Witnesses or not?
When a person no longer chooses to believe what Jehovah's Witnesses teach.
Salvation. You're talking about salvation. So who makes the
No,
final
I was
decision?
talking about requirements for life
That's salvation.
that if they aren't met,
By whose standards?
punishment is meted out.
By whose standards?
By Watchtower standards that keep changing. See, God doesn't change. Watchtower standards change. Like, for instance, let me see if you know this. You're a fourth generation. Prior to adopting the practices in 1951 and then in 1981, what was Watchtower's stand on disfellowshipping and then shunning? You know Loesch?
He's in the worldwide headquarters, right?
He's the governing body member. He's the longest serving member
Okay.
of the current governing body. So I guess that's why they asked him, right?
Yeah.
So they asked Garrett Loesch if he wouldn't mind defending Watchtower's policies in a court-ordered deposition.
Yeah.
And what do you think he did? You think he appeared and gave a defense?
Not sure.
He refused to appear. He refused to appear, you guys. And instead, through Watchtower's legal department, he submitted a written statement where he disavowed having any connection to Watchtower. I am not an agent. I am not an officer. Watchtower has no authority over me. You can find the written statement online. They released it.
Yeah.
So I thought, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Here is a man who is claiming to be one of 7 men who are mediating between the true God and all of humankind, who has the Holy Spirit operating in his life to such an extent, he can't appear in person to defend Watchtower policies, the 2-witness rule, which we know in Australia has made it possible for over 1,000 alleged pedophiles to go unreported to the police. Between 1950 and 2006, that's what the Australian Royal Commission concluded. With the findings and the files that had to be handed over. In Australia alone, over 1,000 pedophiles went unreported to the police because of the 2-witness rule, which is scriptural, but is also making it possible for the worst people to go free and unreported.
Do you think if Jehovah's an all-powerful creator that he'll be able to fix this?
Well, see, if Jehovah is an all-powerful creator and Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses are his one true religion, it shouldn't be an issue in the first place. And it's not just a little issue, it is a huge issue. I mean, why come out and kill somebody if you can get them to kill themselves if you want them dead? I mean, that is how you kill somebody, right? How many Jehovah's Witnesses die every year after refusing blood? How many Jehovah's Witnesses kill themselves after being abused by one of Jehovah's Witnesses and have that abuse treated as though it never happened?
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a second witness,
But,
or because the abuser didn't
thought.
confess? And how many Jehovah's Witnesses kill themselves after being disfellowshipped and shunned and not being able to have any contact with their flesh and blood and people they've known their entire life? Right? How many people every year are Watchtower's policies when it comes to blood, shunning, and abuse reporting killing or getting to kill themselves when they commit suicide. They can't handle it.
One question.
Unfortunately, we're never going to, like, you can't answer that question. I can't answer that question either. Well, Watchtower could answer that question if they were keeping track of that. They're the only organization in the world to be able to keep track of that, and of course they're not going to do that. Because to talk about the number of people that their policies are killing, or the number of people that their policies are getting to kill themselves, would bring reproach on Jehovah, right?
Okay,
but the point is though that God doesn't need Watchtower, you guys.
But you know what?
Watchtower needs people. Watchtower needs people who don't want to have conversations that don't flatter them, and the organization that they're loyal to.
Here's a real quick thought, though.
Have you ever met anybody that died in a hospital bed where you thought, wow, they died faithful?
Think about this.
Have you?
We're all going to die no matter what.
Have you? See, you won't answer the question. See, you're trying to control the conversation.
No, I'm not. I just want to ask you a question.
No, you're not answering any of my questions, though, because the questions I'm asking you don't flatter you. I've noticed that about cult members. That had nothing to do with it.
I mean, do I believe that Satan has some influence on people? Of course he does.
Right.
But we're drawn out by our own desires.
Drawn up by our own desires?
Yeah, totally. Totally are.
You know what I'm finding? Like, the people that leave this organization, it is kind of a crushing experience.
Sure.
Because the way you guys talk about people who leave as being removed from the book of life, worthy of everlasting destruction.
That's not my choice.
Turning their backs on Jehovah.
That's not my choice.
Well, that's what you believe. That's what you're taught.
Well,
hold on, let me finish.
Yeah.
The way you view them, that when somebody does actually have the courage to leave and start doing their own reasoning and not leaving their reasoning to men somewhere over in New York who they're never going to meet, when people start doing their own reasoning and do some real research, like into the Australian Royal Commission, the Palmer case,
I watched
the
a bit of
lawsuit,
it online, yeah.
when people decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to leave, the experience of first leaving is kind of like leaving a prison. You land in a sewage pipe right away. And you say, wait a minute, do I really want to make this escape? Or do I just want to sort of crawl back and accept my life as a captive? You guys are captives. Stanley Park, Deer Lake, English Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I kind of had to stop taking what you guys teach quite so seriously.
Okay.
Because I kept discovering that according to Watchtower,
right?
Not the Bible, because the Bible never changes, right? But according to Watchtower. Oh, by the way, when did you get the truth?
My parents were.
Your parents were witnesses?
Yeah.
And yourself? When did you get the truth?
Yeah, my parents were witnesses.
So you're both second generation witnesses?
Could be third.
Could be third.
My grandparents too started studying after.
Yeah.
Like my mom was 12.
Okay.
When she started studying.
Okay. Yeah. So pretty young. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were raised
as a witness.
Pretty much as a witness. Yeah. Pretty much as a witness.
Yeah.
So I started to learn that according to Watchtower, what the Bible really teaches,
right,
wasn't what the Bible used to really teach.
Right.
So I started asking myself, okay, is something true because people are raised, exposed to it, and are going to believe it for life?
Right.
Is something true because people believe it and spread it and translate it? Or is something true because it proves to be as true tomorrow as it did today and the day before? And unfortunately, with doing some really objective research into Watchtower teachings, I wasn't able to say that about the truth.
Right.
Like, and I started thinking, it's interesting that you guys call it being in the truth, having the truth. When did you get the truth?
Yeah.
When really the search for truth never ends.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, loyalty to Watchtower was preventing me from being honest about my search for truth. And then in the process of challenging myself and doing the research, I discovered the failed predictions, the changes on the doctrine, the faithful and discreet slave, the superior authorities, the generation, the faithful and discreet slave becoming only the governing body, and it was just change after change after change after change. And I said, well, you know, obviously this isn't the truth. So I started doing some really digging, some real hard digging.
Yeah.
And then hi.
How are you?
Good, how's it going?
Good.
Why'd you just show up just now?
Oh, I was just switching off.
Are you switching off?
Yeah.
Please leave.
You're still filming me?
Yeah. Yeah, I am. But I'm filming me too, so it's okay. Hi. So it's fair game. Yeah, it's too bad. Everything is naked and openly exposed before Jehovah. What difference does it make if somebody films his true servants? Lying to the police is not so good, I know. But preaching the good news will be good. But you can do that somewhere else today. Please leave. What are you texting? It's none of my business. I'm just going to make sure that you don't lie to the police about me, because you've done that before. Like, you do this pretty frequently. When people like me come up and talk to you and challenge you and question the integrity of Watchtower, you're quite comfortable lying to us.
Okay.
So, I come out, and the first thing she says is, I know who you are, and if you don't leave, I'm going to call the police. And then she picks up her phone, and then it's like, oh, hi, officer, I've asked this bad man to leave and he won't leave. So I'm saying, like, the hypocrisy. Because they're God's true servants, it's okay for them to come out and threaten me with the police like that. But then when they call you, it's, please, officer, come help us from the bad man. And I'm not a bad man. I've just got some questions to make, some points to make about their organization that nobody told me once upon a time. And they can't handle it. And they kind of play this game where they go to private, publicly accessed areas, like they have a permit to be here. I don't have a permit to be here. That's what Manny was saying yesterday at Burrard. He's like, Stuart, no, this isn't public property. This is private, publicly accessed property. Okay. So that was an education. I was like, okay, so don't go talk to them at Burrard SkyTrain. So I'm thinking that's the same. See, so they anticipate this kind of situation so that when it suits them, they think they have the right to come call you like their bulldog to get rid of people like me. And the thing is, people like me don't lie to them. We don't threaten them with the police. We don't film them from across the street, which she did right over here, and one of the sisters, and then she ran away when I went up to her.
You're filming me now.
Yeah, but I'm filming the whole thing.
So,
I'm filming the whole thing.
I'm not sure I understand.
So the point that I'm making is that I was standing here showing them some documentation. She was filming me. I went up closer up to her to show her what I was filming, and before I even crossed the street, she put the phone away and didn't want to see what I was holding up, the documentation, right? So, like, that's another example. And of course, one of the Jehovah's Witnesses at Burrard physically pushed me, and this guy actually just touched me now. So what I'm saying is that when it suits them to dominate a situation as God's favorite, one and only earthly channel of communicating his message to humankind, they feel good about that. But when somebody comes along who's left the religion, who isn't a drug addict, who isn't diving into hedonism, who isn't totally depressed or who hasn't killed themselves, can get themselves together to come and try to talk to them about their religion, they come down like they are the cops themselves. And when we don't let them get away with that, they call the actual cops, which, if you knew what they believe, it's like, it redefines hypocrisy. They have possibly redefined the word hypocrisy by calling you that. So, hi, you guys. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Please leave. No? Please leave.
Why?
Sir, you don't have to turn this into a confrontation. Okay, so please just leave. It's a beautiful day. Take what you're doing here somewhere else, and please leave. You're refusing to leave?
I'm asking you the same thing.
You're refusing to leave. I've asked you politely to leave. Why won't you leave?
Why? Are you with the city?
Why are you refusing to leave?
Because it's my right.
I've asked you politely. Please leave, sir.
No, thank you.
Have a beautiful day. Take the work that you're doing here and leave. On behalf of Vancouver Public, I'm asking you to leave. You're going to insist on standing here anyway. Are you insisting on standing here even though I politely asked you to leave? Are you? Please leave now. Please leave.
How about I just take my phone out and call the police?
Do it. Call the police right now.
Okay.
Call the police right now.
All right.
Yeah. And then we can talk about these incidents right here. Before you call them, you might want to look at that.
No.
No? Okay, well, I'll show it to you. Okay? So, at Burrard SkyTrain, this brother, I don't know if you know this brother. and this sister. Okay, so on January 26, 2018, when a non-Jehovah's Witness disagreed with you and asked you questions about your organization's integrity, you physically assaulted him.
Okay, it's 7:48 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, New South Wales, Australia. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist. I've tried to do this earlier, and Denise told me that there was no sound. This is the finished letter for XJW Stewart, and I want to read it to you and show you some other stuff through this video. I've had a terrible night. I minded the grandson yesterday, and I ended up completely worn out last night. And then when Denise told me that there was no sound on the presentation, I crashed into a heap. Well, I've had a night's rest. Mixie's helped me get through. I don't know if it was spiritual warfare or what, but it was the worst night I've ever had. Here we go. Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, Christian psychologist, contactable at, to the Honourable Crown Counsel, Grace Ho. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, Grace Ho, I'm writing to you respectively, and please ask that you graciously consider reading my defence concerning a citizen of Vancouver named Stewart, of court file, so on. He has a very constructive and transparent international YouTube channel. I might just take, I'll put international, identified at XJW. I critically observe this minister's narrative as a non-denominational theological professional for my work, helping victims recover from the many facets of religious abuse. I have never been a Jehovah's Witness, and my opinion of this organisation, whilst negative, is based on my many years of theological learning, training and critique at university level, along with interaction with its members. And let's just go here, and in-depth studies of its beliefs, policies and procedures. Dear Honourable Grace Ho, regarding court file, Michael Onwood and Sarah Rochelle Traver have no demonstrable reason to fear injury from Stewart. He has never assaulted or threatened either one of the Jehovah's Witnesses, nor has he disrupted any of their religious meetings. I do not know who Michael Onwood or Sarah Traver are, but I do believe the complaints are relative to XJW episodes as follows. Now, I think we'll try and play one of these, just out of, let's just see what we can get here. Don't think that was right. Hang on. I'll go up there. There. No. Oh dear. What's happening here? Hang on. I'll go here. Now, is that the right car? It was? I'll jump ahead.
The jail that those police brought me to on Thursday. Got to the jail for a reason to say that I'm mentally unfit. Do I look mentally unfit, ma'am? No. So this is, as you can see, viewers, I have not turned off the recording device. I'm a block down from Main and Hastings. This is where I was brought on Thursday night / Friday morning and detained for 4.
No, hang on a minute. Now I'm at Stuart's one of his latest videos, and he's put these on here. Now I'm just going to click on this. I'll fast forward it. Right, here we go.
Would you guys mind leaving, please? Would you guys mind leaving?
Oh, wow.
Pastor, you know it's the right to be there.
Would you guys mind leaving?
Oh, I don't know, Stuart. You pushed the bit.
For you guys to please leave.
Shouldn't laugh.
Excuse me?
You have the right to be there.
Would you mind leaving?
Oh gosh, Stuart, I don't know.
Yes, you would mind? No, you wouldn't mind leaving. Would you mind leaving?
Here he is. Now this is apparently. Here we go.
Yeah, sorry.
Whoa!
No, please don't.
Whoa!
Videos are not permitted.
I would say that's Michael and that's Sarah.
Once again,
There.
step away. We don't permit videos.
Don't touch me.
No, I wouldn't touch you, but your video camera is not welcome here.
I'd say that's the two there. Stuart believes that's Michael. I'd say that's them there. Now, I better fix this. Bear with me. That's better. Yeah, so... He's gone. Michael's bolted. He's bolted. And so on and so forth. So we'll get back to the letter. But that's apparently one of the incidences. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, I'm currently navigating a PhD in Theological Studies with Vision International University, which has been an ongoing education since 1994. My interest in this very alert, active and intelligent gentleman is some 20 years' experience as a Jehovah Witness, as the severe detrimental outcome it has had on his personal life. My interest in this very alert, active and intelligent gentleman is his. Right, now, dear Honourable Counsel, the disturbing news is that Stuart is not by any means alone. Like multitudes of other ex-Jehovah Witnesses, his personal experiential knowledge is profound, genuine and auto-reactive regarding the Jehovah's Witness organisation. I deliberately identify the Jehovah's Witnesses as an organisation, as my studies, amongst others, have relentlessly proven that it is more so an organisation than a church or charity in its practices, policies and procedures. I base my findings and conclusions on its malign theological beliefs, rigid unforgiving procedures and damaging policies that fall delinquently, detrimentally and defiantly short of the standard constitutional New Testament Christian beliefs and doctrines. Now, what I've done now, I think John Cedars, terrific communicator and educator, has put or submitted at some stage a letter to the Charity Commission of England and Wales, and I'll put this in. Now I'm just going to read this. Please consider the following schedule of evidence regarding harmful practices of Jehovah's Witnesses that are not in the public benefit, which was legally presented for the attention of the Charity Commission of England and Wales on the 2nd of August 2014. My request as to your attention to the following be motivated by the fact that the concerns in the following submission are the primary reasons underlying Stuart's motivation and conscientious objection to this organisation. I would also ask your Honourable Crown Counsel Grace Ho to consider that Stuart's conscientious objection of the Jehovah's Witnesses practices is not unstructured by a mental illness or disorder, but much rather a deep-seated concern that the unbeknownst be better educated about the Jehovah's Witness organisation. Now, John Cedars, who I believe is an exceptional educator on the organisation, has I'm pretty sure he's done this. Forgive me if it's not John, but I'm pretty sure it is. I found this on Google. Number 1, mishandling of child sexual abuse. And there's a fair write-up on that. Coercion of members to shun former members in breach of their rights. Now I want to play this.
Hello, Jessica. I am 93 years old. I will be 94 in January, and my eyesight is going bad. I'd love to see you before I lose my eyesight. Remember, you're the granddaughter that I took care of ever since you was born. And I love you. I still love you. And I would love to see you. Would you please call me or come by to see me? I'd love to see you, but I don't know what else to do. I've called you, and you hung up on me, and that wasn't very nice. So if you will come by or call me, I'd love to see you. After all, I took care of you ever since you was born. And other people are very nice to me, except Jehovah's Witnesses.
So that's shunning, and that's how that works. Don't think it doesn't happen. It's rife through the organisation. Now, I'm sure this is John Cedar's work. He's done a beautiful job with this. Then he's got negligent policies regarding domestic abuse. Now I'm going to play one of John's videos on domestic violence.
I wasn't planning on doing a video today, but this is just one of those situations where something has come up and I absolutely need to talk about it now. It's a new Watchtower that has been published. You can see it, you can check it out on jw.org. It is in fact the December 2018 study edition of the Watchtower, and it contains some appalling material on domestic violence. Now, on the one hand, I'm outraged about this. On the other hand, I'm actually in a way kind of glad that this has been published. I'm going to explain why shortly. But first of all, let me read to you the paragraphs in question. It says, admittedly, there have been instances where an unbelieving husband seems to prove that he is not agreeable to staying with her. Here they're quoting from 1 Corinthians 7:12 and 13. He, that's the unbelieving husband, might be extremely physically abusive, even to the point that she feels that her health or life is in danger. he might refuse to support her and the family or severely endanger her spiritually. In such cases, some Christians have personally decided that despite what he might say, the mate is not agreeable to staying together and that a separation is necessary. But other Christians in comparably difficult situations have not. They have endured and tried to work at improving matters. Why? In such a separation, the two are still marriage mates. If they lived apart, each one would face challenges, as mentioned earlier. The Apostle Paul gave another reason for staying united. He wrote, "The unbelieving husband is sanctified in relation to his wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified in relation to the brother. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are holy." Many loyal Christians have remained with an unbelieving mate under very trying circumstances. They can testify that doing so was worthwhile in a special sense when their mate became a true worshipper. Now, I'm bowled over by this. Obviously, the policy itself doesn't surprise me. I've been talking for a long time on my channel about how appalling the domestic violence policy is for Jehovah's Witnesses. I've even interviewed victims of domestic violence whose abuse was exacerbated by precisely this kind of logic. I guess I'm just astonished that they've gone as far as to spell it out so clearly. This is frankly the clearest I've seen it spelled out in Watchtower materials. You literally have a hypothetical situation where a husband who isn't a Jehovah's Witness is being extremely physically abusive, even to the point that the wife feels that her health or life is in danger. And Watchtower is saying, well, some women in that situation would choose to separate, others wouldn't. And actually there are benefits to, quote unquote, enduring in that situation. It's absolutely astonishing. What it doesn't say, of course, is when it's talking about challenges. Oh, well, there will be challenges if the two separate. Really, those challenges are because they're both viewed as scripturally married to each other, which is the essence of the domestic violence policy. Even if a Jehovah's Witness wife is suffering severe physical abuse to the point where her life is endangered, this is not considered grounds for a quote-unquote scriptural divorce. She still has to stay technically married to the man, even if they end up separating, meaning that unless there ends up being coincidental adultery on the part of either her or her husband, it's impossible for her to move on with her life and find happiness elsewhere. I think calling that a challenge is somewhat of an understatement. I'm also livid that this has been printed in this way, because I'm sure it will be used to drive home this policy and to pressure Jehovah's Witness women into staying in these situations where their lives are in danger. You can just imagine elders bringing out this Watchtower article and saying, well, sister, it's all a matter of enduring. If you're not putting up with this situation, if you're not muddling through regardless, you're just not enduring. You're throwing in the towel at the first hurdle, when what they should really be saying is, get out of that relationship, get as far away from this man as possible and move on with your life. They're not going to say that because, again, in the Jehovah's Witness religion, there are no grounds for divorce apart from adultery. So the couple have to stay together no matter what, unless there is infidelity. It's an impossible situation in which to put a battered wife or husband, and it's a policy that is being celebrated on these pages.
Well, there you go. You make up your own mind on that. Coercion of members to decline mental treatment and blood transfusions. Just want to say specifically thank you to John Cedars for the work that he does. It's really got nothing to do with me what he does, but he's such a good communicator on the Jehovah Witness organisation. Now we're going to look at some blood policy stuff. Here's one video.
And 29 about ingesting blood or blood transfusions.
Yes.
Or donate.
Oh yes, well that's interesting. Yeah. Well, yes, I don't think blood transfusion is anything remotely to do with anything that Moses or the Bible ever conceived. So you don't need to worry about that. If you're going to be dying, but for the taking in of some blood given generously by some donor, I'd go for it. Eating blood is quite a different category from taking blood to save your life in an accident. So I really think it's a misuse of Scripture to try to connect those two things. I notice that the Jehovah's Witnesses have lightened up on this quite a bit. They're allowing for some sort of blood transfusion now. So just a misconception, I would think. I don't think Paul or Moses or the Bible writers have that kind of procedure in mind at all.
So what is it about?
Well, they're talking about kosher foods there, I would think, quite clearly, because some of these people are still attending the synagogue and they're hearing about kosher foods. Now, you don't want to offend a Jew who's weak at that point. Now, the whole issue of foods, of course, is very clear in Paul.
And now we'll look at another blood doctrine video. I like this one. It's from Australia.
First, the 7-year-old boy facing death because his parents' religious beliefs prohibit blood transfusions. The couple, devout Jehovah's Witnesses, acknowledge their son needs a liver transplant, but refuse to consent to him receiving blood. As Jenna Hudson reports, they're headed to the Supreme Court.
We understand this is very stressing for you, but how can you deny your son the treatment he needs to survive?
We are talking about the difference between potentially a child dying or surviving.
You could give him the consent to have this blood transfusion. Why won't you? Why can't you?
Parents around the country are right now shocked and angry at the heartbreaking determination of this mum and dad. Their 7-year-old son has a genetic disease that's shutting down his liver, and he will die unless he has a liver transplant. Problem is, mum and dad are devout Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're refusing to give consent to one vital part of the surgery their son so desperately needs.
Is that the risk that you're willing to take?
The blood transfusion their little boy will most certainly need during the operation is completely against their religious beliefs.
For Jehovah's Witnesses, there are essentially no exceptions for the acceptance of blood transfusions.
How can you deny your son, though, of a blood transfusion he so desperately needs?
Please leave me alone.
The Children's Health Queensland Hospital is taking the parents to the Supreme Court in a fight for the little boy's life. In these documents, it states the parents are aware their child will die within 2 years without this treatment. But on the consent form, the father has crossed out the words blood transfusion.
I don't believe that the argument that you can have a transplant without a transfusion is logical, because you still have some residual blood from the donor in the transplanted organ.
Dr. Ross Walker is one of the only Australian medical practitioners who is willing to talk on camera about this sensitive topic.
When we're talking about the life of a child, I think people's own religious beliefs have to stand aside.
This is the little boy's paediatric gastroenterologist. In court documents, she shares her deepest concerns.
Death is an inevitable consequence of liver failure unless a liver transplant is performed. In a small patient, even a relatively small amount of blood can be significant.
All doctors involved in this controversial and delicate case cannot be interviewed because this medical tug of war is still before the Supreme Court.
You can't have the transplant without the transfusion in the vast majority of cases.
A doctor in the court affidavit also states if the boy has the liver transplant with the blood transfusion soon, he has a 90% chance of surviving for another 5 years and a 72% chance of living for more than 25 years. Doctors also say the sicker the little boy gets, the harder it is to carry out the liver transplant at all.
These are very intricate operations and there's quite a deal of blood loss that goes with the operation.
Jehovah's Witnesses believe the Bible commands they must not ingest blood. They say blood represents life and only God is the giver of life. We're told what these parents are fearing is that their child will be polluted, both spiritually and morally.
Really not accepting blood transfusions, perhaps even in a situation where it might be a case of life and death, is essentially considered a small price to pay for eternal life.
University of Queensland Dr. Tom Eckner is a lecturer in history of religious thought.
So these decisions about whether a child will live and die, perhaps regarding accepting a blood transfusion or not accepting, must be viewed in terms of what God would want for that child.
In the eyes of a Jehovah's Witness, how would they view this case?
I think that Jehovah's Witnesses would see this as the government impinging upon very central and foundational beliefs that they have, that they've based their lives upon.
Look, we just wanted to find out, how is your son feeling today?
The boy's parents aren't willing to defend their decision, which could ultimately kill their son.
He could die without a blood transfusion. Is that the risk that you're willing to take?
It's my opinion that religion should have no role in the operating theatre. We're talking about life and death situations as opposed to someone's personal philosophy, especially when you're inflicting that personal philosophy on your child.
Are you willing to sacrifice his life for your religion? Is that what it is?
I said leave me alone.
There are many controversial cases relating to Jehovah's Witness children and blood transfusions. In Sydney this year, a pregnant Jehovah's Witness and her baby tragically died after the woman refused a blood transfusion. Also in New South Wales in 2013, the Supreme Court overruled the wishes of a 17-year-old Jehovah's Witness suffering from a lethal form of blood cancer. In London last year, a High Court judge ruled that the son of 2 devout Jehovah's Witnesses can be given blood. And in Dublin in 2008, a High Court judge said a 4-year-old girl could undergo a life-saving blood transfusion, despite her parents' objections.
I don't believe that Jehovah's Witnesses are irrational people. I don't believe that we can just simply label them as good or bad. It's not that black and white.
And I think in that situation, we've got to do what's best for the child.
Is your religion more important to you than your son's life?
It's endless, isn't it? It's endless with this organisation. It just goes on and on and on. Now, let's move on from that. The next part is coercion of young people to avoid higher education. Now we'll go with the Reaching Out channel on this one, viewers.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Reaching Out channel. For this video I wanted to look at one of the reasons why we stopped going to Jehovah's Witness meetings, which was the issue of higher education. The organisation historically have always been against higher education, something that I've never really understood. But seeing as we had now become parents ourselves, we were now facing the decision of how this would affect us personally for the future generation. So, if I give you a little bit of background, I'm a 3rd generation Jehovah's Witness. My father was contacted with his mother and sister just at the time when they were in their approaching their early 20s. And so my father, he had an apprenticeship lined up which he turned down so that he could go pioneering in the days when he had to do about 100 hours a month. My auntie, she was extremely intelligent, multilingual, amazing lady. She had a university place lined up and she turned that down again for pioneering. My dad has spent his entire life telling me that it's the worst decision he ever made and how his life would have been so much easier had he kept his apprenticeship. So what would happen when I was due to leave school? In those days, mandatory education ended at 16. I was in no way prepared or qualified indeed to get a job. So my parents stuck their necks out and were amazingly supportive. They allowed us to stay on for an extra 2 years to get vocational qualifications and training that would enable us to get work from age 18. What were the repercussions for them? Well, my dad at that time, he was a Watchtower conductor. He was removed from that privilege. He was no longer allowed to take the Watchtower, so he was pretty much an elder in name only. I can only imagine what the elders' meetings must have been like for him. I think they must have been torture. So all credit to my parents for allowing me to do that. Did we ever discuss the prospect of me going to university? Of course not. Nobody goes to university. I always excelled at school, but didn't even cross our minds to talk about university. This was 2 years of staying on at school. This was not a university education. I remember in my final year at school, the deputy head teacher said so to my parents at the teachers' evening. Next year we'll be discussing what university she goes to. And I remember coming out and just feeling absolutely despondent because obviously that conversation was never going to happen. It was never in my future. So I've been really lucky. Those 2 years of extra training really helped me. I've had wonderful employers who've paid for me over the years to do postgraduate qualifications, so I've managed to leapfrog my missing degree, which is amazing. My husband's the same, but would that option be available for my children? Well, the financial situation in the country these days, I don't know if that option would be available to my children. So even though it's another 10 years away, it's already making me think about higher education. I also don't want my children to spend their years at school thinking that they don't have to bother, they don't have to try, because they won't be staying on at school anyway, they'll just be getting a job. So why put any effort in? Which I did see that attitude amongst my peer group, that they were just going to go to school and have a laugh, not really push themselves, because there wasn't really any point, because Jehovah's Witnesses are interested in trying their best, which I think is not a good attitude to have. So that really made us think, is this ever going to change with the organisation? Are they ever going to change their stance on higher education? And you know what, I don't think they ever will. If they haven't done for the past 40 years, then why would they change it for my children? I don't think they will. So that was another concern as to why we didn't think the Jehovah's Witnesses had got it right on this one. Thank you for listening. Take care. See you later. Bye.
And then we've got other material worthy of consideration by the Charity Commission, and he's got theocratic warfare.
The Watchtower organization has a policy it encourages members to use called theocratic war strategy. There are numerous references to this policy in their publications. Let's look at a few. The March 15, 1967 Watchtower carries a testimony from a Jehovah's Witness.
I had been beaten by the Gestapo, and on the following Monday I was to be interrogated by them again. What would happen now, and what was I to do? I turned to Jehovah in prayer, trusting in his promises. I knew this meant the use of theocratic war strategy for the sake of the kingdom work and the protection of my Christian brothers.
From the Watchtower of February 1, 1965.
It now became necessary to use theocratic war strategy in order to maintain desired contact with occupied countries.
Got that. April 15, 1957.
On meeting wolves, Christians will use strategy, being wise as serpents, yet innocent as doves, in accord with Jesus' direction at Matthew 10:16.
Interesting. So now we are being told that this strategy is being used in keeping with instructions from Jesus himself. What exactly is this theocratic war strategy? We get an understanding from the May 1, 1957 issue of the Watchtower magazine under the topic Use Theocratic War Strategy.
A witness of Jehovah was going from house to house in eastern Germany when she met a violent opposer. Knowing at once what to expect, she changed her red blouse for a green one in the very next hallway. No sooner had she appeared on the street than a communist officer asked her if she had seen a woman with a red blouse. No, she replied, and went on her way. Did she tell a lie? No, she did not. She was not a liar. Rather, she was using theocratic war strategy, hiding the truth by action and word for the sake of the ministry.
Okay, so they believe in, endorse, and obviously practice hiding the truth. But why? We are told in their book, Insights into the Scriptures, Volume 2, discussing the subject lie.
While malicious lying is definitely condemned in the Bible, this does not mean that a person is under obligation to divulge truthful information to people who are not entitled to it.
People who are not entitled to it? Who are people not entitled to truthful information? And who decides which people are so entitled? Are you entitled to it? Am I entitled? Are innocent Jehovah's Witnesses entitled to truthful information? We will discuss this in video 4 and in more details in video 5. What is particularly dangerous and quite disturbing about all of this is how they seek to use the scriptures to justify this strange philosophy. The statement about Christians using strategy in accord with Jesus' direction at Matthew 10 verse 16 is an insult to the Lord. Jesus meant that in the matter of evangelism we should be crafty as snakes, but innocent or blameless as doves. In seeking to win souls, we are to be smart in not doing something that will chase the candidate away. But in so doing, we must not be guilty of anything that God finds abominable. We must not sin in our attempt to be crafty. That is Jesus' message. The Watchtower claims it is not speaking of deliberate lying, but of holding back truthful information. But what a tangled web we weave when we try to deceive. They used Rahab's deliberate lie to justify their philosophy. Rahab lied, and the Watchtower Society lies big time in saying that God approved it.
What about Rahab's misleading words to the pursuers of the spies? God approved of her course.
The organization makes a big deal about knowing God's name. Do they know God's character? Never has God approved of sin, and lying lips are an abomination to God. Proverbs chapter 6, starting at verse 16, says there are 6 things that God hates. In fact, it says it's a list of 7 that are abominable to God, but one is repeated, making it really 6 things. 1. A proud look. 2. A lying tongue. 3. Hands that shed innocent blood. 4. A heart that embraces wicked thoughts. 5. Feet that are swift to run to mischief. 6. A witness, including a Jehovah's Witness who tells lies. 7. A person who sows discord among family. The fact that God permits sin does not mean he approves it. Rahab had good intentions in hiding the spies. Of that God could approve, certainly not her lying. God, as he does for you and me, looked beyond her sin and extended his grace. The Watchtower itself told us that she had not yet abandoned her worldly ways. God did not need Rahab to lie any more than he needed Moses to murder an Egyptian. Would the Watchtower argue that God approved Jacob's course of stealing his brother's birthright because God blessed him immensely? The unholy interpretation of scriptures continues. They claimed that the lady who lied to the Gestapo had, get this, good scriptural precedent, citing Abraham and other patriarchs. Of Abraham lying about Sarah, they argued he was not under obligation to divulge truthful information to people who were not entitled to it. God himself intervened and warned the king if he dared sleep with Sarah. The king was not amused when he confronted Abraham about the lie. He was entitled to the truth, unlike the Watchtower claims. But it gets worse. Even Jesus.
Now I want to come back to the first one, which was child sexual abuse. I want to come back to the very first one. Where is it? And there it is, mishandling of child sexual abuse. Let's find a video on that.
An investigation into child sexual abuse among Jehovah's Witnesses and accusations that religious leaders led a cover-up within some of the group's 14,000 U.S. congregations. Our colleagues from the Center for Investigative Reporting obtained confidential memos shedding new light on the revelations. Special correspondent Trey Bundy has the story from Reveal, a new website, radio show, and podcast run by the Center.
At a convention of Jehovah's Witnesses in California, new members are taking the plunge. Believers are taught to renounce secular society because it's controlled by Satan, and not to socialize too much with outsiders. But charges of sexual abuse have brought this insular community under greater scrutiny. And now, in this San Francisco courtroom, the first child abuse case against the Jehovah's Witnesses to go to trial is underway. Candace Conti is suing the organization for failing to protect her from a known child abuser when she was 9 years old.
If I were to sum up our goals of this case, it was to attack the policies and procedures that were in place that let a serial molester continue to molest children.
Conti's lawyer says instructions from Jehovah's Witness leaders have enabled child molesters.
The instructions were you keep these pedophiles secret.
The case hinges on letters from Jehovah's Witness leaders to the heads of local congregations. For almost 20 years, they've ordered them to send reports, like this one, for every known child abuser, to hide these cases from their congregations, and not to cooperate with law enforcement or the courts unless instructed to. They've refused judges' orders to turn over these abuse reports, so no one knows how many cases like Conti's are out there.
Jehovah's Witnesses abhor child abuse of any form.
The Jehovah's Witnesses insist that they comply with the law, and their lawyers argue that the First Amendment gives them the right to set child abuse policies as they see fit.
Religious beliefs and standards of Jehovah's Witnesses were at play in this case from start to finish.
The religious beliefs come from the Watchtower Bible Tract Society in Brooklyn, which has often used the First Amendment to defend its policies of separation. In 1943, it even won a Supreme Court case, arguing that school children should not be forced to pledge allegiance to the flag.
May it please the court, James McCabe on behalf of the North Fremont.
Watchtower lawyers, who refuse to speak with us, are again claiming a First Amendment defense to keep child abuse in its congregation's secret.
And the elders are counseled in that letter to give special heed to the counsel do not reveal the confidential talk of another, quoting from the Bible book of Proverbs chapter 25, verse 9.
Candace Conti was part of a Jehovah's Witness congregation in Fremont, California. She was often grouped with adults to go knocking on doors, including this man, Jonathan Kendrick.
He was very dominating, very domineering, very, he commanded a presence.
She says Kendrick would take advantage of their time door knocking to find ways to be alone with her.
Jonathan Kendrick molested me as a child. I really kind of pushed everything down and tried not to think about it as much as I could.
What no one in Conti's family knew was that Jonathan Kendrick had admitted to molesting another child a year earlier.
Regarding possible sexual abuse.
Michael Clark, an elder in the congregation, was asked about it in this deposition.
Do you recall becoming aware of a report of sexual abuse of a child by Jonathan Kendrick?
Yes.
When did you first become aware of such a report?
He had called us to his home to discuss or to confess to an incident with his stepdaughter.
Clark never called the police. He followed Watchtower protocol. He wrote to New York headquarters asking how to deal with Kendrick's confession. They told him not to investigate the matter further. Instead, they said, provide him with strong scriptural counsel to avoid a repetition of such a serious offense.
We don't make that public to the congregation. It's confidential.
The elders did not warn other members that one of their own was a child abuser.
And that's the policy and the practice of Jehovah's Witnesses that you learned as an elder, correct?
Yes.
Clark says the elders told Kendrick not to be alone with children, but he was still allowed to join in congregation activities that included minors. A year later, one of those minors was Candace Conti.
And I don't think it ever left. I know it never left me. You know, it's always there. And it was just probably one of those days that, you know, I just felt it.
Conti kept quiet about the abuse until years later when she discovered on a sex offender registry that he had gone on to molest another young girl. She decided to sue the Watchtower.
I think after I had found that out, I had this sense of guilt. You know, what if I did something? What if I hadn't been such a coward? What if I had done something to maybe protect this other child? You know, I knew he was capable of, but I didn't do anything. You know, and then now look what happened.
I drove to Oakley, California, where Kendrick had moved when he left Conti's congregation. I met the girl Conti had found. She agreed to talk to us if we didn't show her face.
When I was a little girl, like probably about 6 or 7, Jonathan and Kendrick had abused me.
She blames the Watchtower's secrecy for enabling Kendrick to marry into her family and target her. The family sued the Jehovah's Witnesses.
They knew that he had a past, and they kept it from us.
When Kendrick moved to the Oakley congregation, no one was told he was a child molester. Not even Roger Bentley, who served as an elder there for 30 years. He reviewed this letter of introduction from Kendrick's old congregation.
There's no indication at all that he's guilty of child abuse.
So no mention of child abuse, but any mention of children?
Well, if you read it, it very specifically says he's a very interesting individual who has taken the lead with some young ones in the congregation and helped them from veering off course. That's not a child abuser. That's a recommendation. That's a very specific recommendation. Oh, relax, he's good with kids.
I've spent months trying to interview Watchtower leaders, but they wouldn't talk to me. Instead, they sent a statement saying they comply with reporting laws, they do not shield abusers from law enforcement, and are committed to preventing child abuse. In one of the dozen lawsuits I've been following, Watchtower supervisor Richard Ash was asked if the organization has a responsibility to protect children from abuse.
But within the congregation, ours is a spiritual protection. When we're talking about physical protection, that's up to the secular authorities to provide. And so
he was asked about the Watchtower's Bible-based directives to keep child abuse cases confidential.
It states in paragraph 3, there is a time to keep quiet when your words should prove to be few. Do you see that?
Yes.
You know,
Mr. Object to that. It's a violation of the First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of association.
The courts continue to grapple with the question, should freedom of religion outweigh the responsibility to protect children? In Candace Conti's case, the jury overrode the First Amendment claims and decided the Watchtower and the North Fremont congregation were negligent and did not adequately protect her from abuse. Kendrick maintains he never molested her. Pending appeal, she was awarded more than $15 million in compensation and damages. It's the first time a jury has ordered the Watchtower to pay for its child abuse policies. But for Kendrick's other victim, her case against the Watchtower was thrown out. Even though Kendrick confessed to the abuse in this deposition and served about 8 months in jail, the judge affirmed that the Watchtower's policies were protected by the First Amendment. It was not liable because the abuse occurred at home and not in the course of religious activity. The Watchtower had no obligation to warn the family about Kendrick's past. Kendrick is now free and still an active member of the Oakley congregation.
The fact that Jonathan Kendrick is still a member in good standings is absolutely ridiculous. It's scary. I mean, the fact that he still has access to children. And really, my parents didn't have the power to know that Jonathan Kendrick was a child abuser. Let's give the parents the power to be able to protect their children. And that's what these organizations are hiding.
Despite the huge verdict against the Watchtower, the organization is sticking to its policy. In fact, it just released another confidential memo reminding elders to keep quiet about child abuse. I'm Trey Bundy from Reveal for the NewsHour.
So if you're not satisfied that this person will not offend again, then you won't reprove. You'll disfellowship. Yes. And when the person's disfellowshipped, they then can still attend meetings and so on, but under some restriction, is that right? Under a lot of restrictions. Yes. And members of the congregation cannot associate with them socially. Socially or spiritually? Yes. But the person is still otherwise in the world and can associate with people outside of the church. Yes. And you don't take into consideration, do you, how people outside of the church might be kept safe from such a person whom you're not satisfied will not reoffend? If they were outside the church and they were a close friend, I would tell them. Well, and how would you know if they're a close friend and they're outside of the church? If they're a close friend of mine. A close friend of yours? If I was. Yes. If I associated with them. Well, what about people who are not close friends of yours, others than outside of the church? You don't take any steps, do you, to protect them from this potential reoffending? You don't, do you? You're concerned with the congregation principally, aren't you? We're concerned with the congregations. We are shepherds of the congregation. Yes, and you're not a shepherd to those who are not in the congregation. No. And as an organisation, in your experience, you don't seek to protect or take care of children who are outside of the congregation. That's a broad statement. Well, I can limit it. Yeah, limit it, in please. Your decision on whether or not to disfellowship someone, you don't take consideration of children outside of the congregation. Do take consideration of them, but what ability have we got to protect every child in Australia? Well, what you can do is you can report to the child protection authorities.
And that is done in some cases.
But generally it's not done, is it?
No.
It's not done unless there's a legal requirement for it to be done, is there?
That is true.
Another way we can contribute to the oneness, rejecting false stories that are designed to separate us from Jehovah's organization. As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it?
In your statement, you also say that reporting to the police is a personal decision for a victim and his or her parents if a minor. Is it a personal decision for an elder as to whether to report to the police something that's been reported to the elder which might constitute a crime?
Is it the elder's responsibility to do that? Is that what you're asking?
Is it the elder's personal decision as to whether to report information received by the elder that would amount to a crime?
No, it's not the elder's decision. We respect the right of the person who has been who has been a victim. We reserve her the right or his right to do that. But we will do everything we can to support it.
If a different crime, to take the most extreme murder, if you were told that a member of the congregation had killed someone else, would you report that to the police?
We would encourage the person to do that.
Would you do it yourself?
No, I would try very hard not to. Not that I would try very hard not to, but I would encourage the person continually to do that. That's a decision that they need to make.
Well, what if the person wasn't prepared to go to the police, but they told you that they saw the killing happen? What would you do?
Am I being asked on the present day circumstances?
Yeah.
Yes. I would take the action of ringing the branch and getting some legal advice on that.
Do you have any knowledge? You're living in Queensland, aren't you?
Yes.
Do you have any knowledge of the law or legal obligations to report knowledge of crimes at all?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Do you know of any case, Mr. Ally, in which an elder has reported a criminal matter to the police?
No, I can't say that I have.
It reads there, no single witness may convict another for any error or any sin that he may commit. On the testimony of 2 witnesses or on the testimony of 3 witnesses, the matter should be established.
And what's the context for that discussion?
I would like to read it all right through to get the context. I'm sorry.
Well, we won't stop to do that now. But I understand where the Jehovah's Witnesses place their confidence, but do you accept that we have a true conflict between an understanding that we all have of human behaviour and, as you say, your capacity to believe that she was telling the truth, and what might be, by reason of adherence to that particular piece in the Bible, a conflict?
I put a lot of store by what that principle says, and I have a lot of store also to believe that other things will come out that would provide that, but on the ground of one person's word against another, we cannot act judicially. any further.
No, but you appreciate the civil courts can.
Well, that's where there's a difference for the civil court then.
But do you appreciate the civil courts can?
On one person's word?
Yeah.
I'm not... I don't know about the civil court, Your Honour.
You don't know. What I'm trying to get to is whether you accept that there is a conflict between what the Bible's telling you and what your experience as a human being tells you about capacity to accept one person's word against another, based upon your own assessment of what they're saying.
I don't believe that's correct, Your Honour. I really believe that I was saying there, having one witness, you can't establish it beyond any doubt. You can't act on that. If you have another witness to something similar that that person has done, yes, then we've got two witnesses. But on the evidence of one, that's my understanding, is that we cannot act. And that's how I
say that in the face of telling me that you believe what she told you.
Yes.
Even though at that point it was word on word.
Yes, we believed her.
Applying scripture as we read it in the best way we can to sensitively integrate with modern society.
But you understand the point. There may well be, and we're in one such area where science has taught us a lot in recent years about sexual abuse and how to appropriately respond to it. But if that science was in conflict with your understanding of the Bible, then the Bible would prevail.
Absolutely, the Bible will prevail. And if I could, Your Honour, that's why hundreds of Jehovah's Witnesses are imprisoned in South Korea, in Taganrog, Russia, Azerbaijan, Eritrea, because they won't budge on a clear Bible principle that will endure forever.
So if the law of the country was to prescribe a mode of behaviour which was in conflict with your understanding of the Bible, what would happen then?
We would apply the words in the book of Acts 5:29 to obey God as ruler rather than men, and as we did here during the Second World War, as thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses did when they refused to come under the Nazi regime. The fact that the government at the time makes a law, Jehovah's Witnesses will always obey Scripture, and that's why we have 28 successful outcomes in the European Court of Human Rights, because we won't budge where there's a clear Bible principle that happens to be in conflict with a government.
You mean it was only when the matter went to court that you understood the serious nature of the events that had happened?
No, it was well before that. It was when the motions we started to go through, when it became something that was clearly a real victimisation of a young person by her parent, that all of us elders then acted very swiftly in dealing with that situation. Now, this may have been a prelude to that. I don't know. I cannot recollect this particular discussion. But
we'll come to what you did do in response to what you knew. But is it right to understand that the teaching of your church requires someone who has a disagreement with another member of the congregation to first of all seek to put matters right with that other person?
That would be the first step.
So what BCG says in her statement about her conversation with you and your response is consistent with the teaching of the church. Is that right?
It should be, yes. But
it's the response that she says you made, as I understand it, from what you've told me, is consistent with the teachings of the church. That is, no, you have to talk to your father first.
Again, Your Honour, I'm sorry, but I can't recollect that.
No, come back. What she says you said, as I understand it, is consistent with the teachings of the church. That is, you've got to speak to your father first.
Generally, if it was something of a minor concern, yes.
Well, you don't know from this conversation whether it's major or minor. So do I then understand that what you're saying to us is that what she reports you as having said is consistent with the teachings of the church?
I would have to think very carefully on that whole aspect, because if I could remember the rest of a conversation that one might have, then perhaps I can comment, but I cannot recall
I'm
this
sorry,
having
I'll have
happened.
to put it to you again. We're just looking at the conversation that she says occurred. Now, you may not remember it, but that's what she says happened. What I want to know is whether that conversation, as she records it from you, is consistent with the teachings of the church, and that is, no, you've got to talk to your father first.
If this did really happen, I'm not doubting that it did, then it would be consistent with myself to follow through and have a discussion with her. And to also approach the parent if it was of something of concern, yes.
I'm lost. She says you said, no, you have to talk to your father first. Now, as I understand it from what you've already told me, a statement such as that by you is consistent with the teachings of the church.
It would be, yes, yes, definitely.
Now, do you recall
And tonight, a City News exclusive, this is a $66 million class action lawsuit that's been filed against a religious organization best known for its door-to-door proselytizing. The Jehovah's Witnesses accused of having rules and policies that protect child sex abusers and put children in harm's way.
This is an issue that the wider communities should be concerned with as a result of their procedures when abuse allegations come forward. These principal offenders are left at large in the communities. And as most people know about Jehovah's Witnesses, they're the ones that come to your door on Saturday morning when your kids are home.
Tricia says her first 14 years of life as a Jehovah's Witness was filled with sexual abuse that was ignored and covered up by the religious organization she has now left. This $66 million class action lawsuit has now been filed on behalf of alleged child sex abuse victims across the country, claiming this. The organization's policy and protocol for dealing with allegations of sexual abuse is seriously flawed and results in further harm to victims of sexual abuse and results in legitimate allegations of sexual abuse going unreported. Specifically named in the suit is what's called the two-witness rule.
They're expected to produce two credible eyewitnesses to their assault or to their abuse. And by credible eyewitness, I mean the eyewitnesses not only have to be other Jehovah's Witnesses that saw it occur, but have to be Jehovah's Witnesses in good standing in the church. So this obviously never happens.
The suit also alleges that police are not called when allegations surface, but are instead handled by JW elders inside Kingdom Hall. The claim, so far untested in court, alleges this. For decades, the organization has received thousands of reports of sexual abuse, including child sex abuse, and has failed to investigate and or report the abuse to secular authorities, even where required by law. Is it the assertion of this statement of claim, of this class action lawsuit, that the Jehovah's Witness organization deliberately protects child abusers?
It is our information based on people who contacted us that the systems in place don't guard against it happening, and then when allegations are raised, that adequate measures are in place to see that the complaint reaches public authorities.
Now, none of these allegations have been proven in court, and I did reach out to the Jehovah's Witnesses in Canada. They wouldn't comment specifically on the allegations in here, but they did in a statement tell me Jehovah's Witnesses abhor child abuse and would never shield any. Go on to say elders comply with child abuse reporting laws.
The Jehovah's Witnesses have a real problem with how they respond to claims of childhood sexual abuse, especially claims against an elder or ministerial servant. According to the policies of the Jehovah's Witnesses, once a complaint is made known to an elder, That elder then has to engage two other elders to conduct a so-called investigation. If there is an admission by the perpetrator or two eyewitnesses to the abuse, then a judicial committee will be formed and action will be taken. Either that perpetrator will be reproved if they're sufficiently repentant, or they will be disfellowshipped. Well, the real problem with that is that rarely do you have two eyewitnesses to the abuse of a child, and certainly it's even more rare for a perpetrator to admit to it. So the policy is flawed to begin with. What you should do if you were a victim of abuse by a Jehovah's Witness elder is go to law enforcement. Yes, the elders will do everything to convince you not to, that you will even perhaps get a call from the service committee, someone from the service committee or the legal department of the Watchtower to convince you not to, but you need to go to law enforcement. Only law enforcement can conduct a proper investigation and get counseling, get help.
From my studies as a historian and someone who has taught religious studies at university level, my ready reckoning is that 50% of all of the children of Jehovah's Witnesses leave the movement because they simply cannot take the constant pressures that go on within the community. Then they begin to ask questions. Well, why? When they get to be teenagers and young adults, why do we do this way? Why? What are the reasons for? Well, don't ask me why. This is just the way it is. This is what someone in authority has said, and in the world in which we live, that's simply not good enough. And then frequently they will leave the religious movement, and since they have no internalized value system, they either explode or implode ethically and morally. I have known literally hundreds of people who are suffering and have suffered terribly. And I often have people come to me and say, well, what's the use of my trying to do this or that? What's the use of my having a religious belief? I am so sinful that God couldn't save me. I know that there were times that I was just horrified at the treatment of children. And when you have a religion that doesn't recognize that children are children, this is pretty sick. This often results in tremendous repression. Oh, you mustn't go to university. Or if you go to university, you've got to study a certain field, because if you study another field, you might be contaminated by evolution, or you might be contaminated by some other thought process. But in some of these judicial committees, what will happen is, well, how did you get involved in the act? How far did he penetrate you? And questions such as this that had really nothing to do with much of anything. And can you imagine a young 15, 16-year-old girl being asked this by 40 and 50-year-old men? Just totally destructive. It's almost like psychological rape. And it was that incredible insensitivity, that self-righteousness, that sickened me so much. And eventually I just couldn't keep still. I had loved so many people in the community. I saw people whom I had loved, whom I would give my life for, turn on me like vipers. I saw others who I didn't think would come forward and give me support do so. And I thank God for those persons, and I love them very much to this day. Over 80 of us left at one time in Lethbridge. Thousands upon thousands of people who have left Jehovah's Witnesses and other tight religious groups have had their physical health destroyed. Many of them have had their mental health destroyed. Many of them have had their spiritual health destroyed. Many of them simply find it impossible to overcome the experiences that they've had. Many of them go on for 20 years with the deepest hurt and the deepest bitterness. And it's a horrible thing when a religion which claims to be of the God of love, when it does this to people. It's so awful. And of course, it's the Pharisaism of the 20th and 21st centuries.
On Tuesday, September 26, 2017, a class action lawsuit request was filed against Jehovah's Witnesses in Canada on behalf of child sex abuse victims in the religion, asking for a total sum of 66 million Canadian dollars. Now, first of all, this lawsuit notes many important details that make the Watchtower liable for sexual abuse cases within the religion. One of them is how the elders want to delegate responsibility for reporting such abuse to the adult victims or to the parents of the victims. I'll put up a screen capture of that particular paragraph in the filing so you can see exactly what it says in context. The lawsuit also brings out the threat of disfellowshipping a victim for slander if they can't provide a witness to their abuse and if the accused person does not confess. And again, I'll put up a screen capture of that particular paragraph in the lawsuit so you can see exactly what it says. The lawsuit also notes, among other things, the prohibition against group therapy or counseling to protect the confidentiality of others in the congregation. It also mentions the authority of the elders, how congregants are to defer to that authority, and then also the opportunity that elders have to abuse their power and authority, resulting in child sex abuse. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the term, a class action lawsuit refers to a lawsuit that is filed on behalf of many people, not just one individual. The settlement or the judgment from that lawsuit would then be shared among all those plaintiffs. Now, this particular lawsuit in Canada is unique because it will include all of those in Canada who were sexually abused as children in the religion, not just residents of one particular Canadian province. Now, the lawsuit specifically includes plaintiffs who were sexually abused by elders in particular, but also those who were sexually abused by other adult members of the religion. Now, the lawsuit, as of this recording, is still in its infancy. It's just been served to the Watchtower. However, if you think you might qualify to be part of the lawsuit, the attorneys have put up a page on their website that has a questionnaire that you can fill out, and it will be sent right to them. Please direct any and all of your legal questions to the attorneys as well. They're listed on that page, their email, their phone number, and whatnot. Now, one last quick note. There's no trial date set. This is just an application for the suit to go forward. The Watchtower has like 20 days from the time that they're served to answer to the lawsuit. We know that these things take years usually to work their way through the courts. That having been said, this is already hitting the news circuits in Canada. I will leave links to a few news stories, one of which includes an interview with one of the victims who is behind this lawsuit. All of this, the negative publicity, the legal costs just in answering this is all going to give the Watchtower just another black eye. So I'll try to stay updated as much as possible. Keep your fingers crossed that it's successful. And in the meantime, we hope that this brings some measure of justice to the victims who have suffered from these just horrific practices and policies in the Watchtower.
So if we go back to the letter now. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, Stuart is exceptionally intelligent, an exceptionally intelligent person, and his narratives are most definitely not based on a mental disorder or mental condition in my professional opinion. While Stewart has had breakdowns in the past, this does not have any influence over his ministry work today. In fact, his ministry work could well be therapeutic for him, given the trauma he has suffered during his involvement with the Jehovah's Witness organization. Any assumption that this is a matter of mental illness is presumptive at least, and a severe form of character assassination based on the evidence revealed in his transparent and very sound-minded narratives. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, in Stewart in his own time without pay, but exclusively out of sincere, experiential loss, stress and mental breakdown because of being a member of the organisation, and I'm going to put Jehovah's Witnesses organisation, along with many professionals worldwide, is concerned for the spiritual and mortal welfare of the public as to the presence of this organisation in the public arena and its recruitment process. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, Grace Ho, Stewart is sincerely doing a legitimate educational theological work, and a service that deserves far more respect, support and honour than is being presented and diagnosed under court file. And I ask that you adjudicate these matters from the theological perspective that they deserve within the common law judicial system. We'll get judicial out of that, won't we? Judicial system. Is that close or what? Oh no. Oh, law system. Let's just go with law system. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, Stewart's international audience is paying very close attention to this case, given the circumstances, and I request on behalf of his 300 or 1,300 subscribers, both national and international, that Dear Honourable Crown Counsel consider both the theological matters of welfare and warfare in this matter to be in favour of Stewart, as the Jehovah's Witnesses do not own the public areas in which they entice the public to join the organisation, nor do they have the theological expertise or integrity to be enticing more innocent public members into the organisation by way of public engagement. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, just as the Jehovah's Witnesses have their right to take their false and extraordinarily beleaguered beliefs and propaganda to the public, equally, Stewart has every right to observe and narrate on the organisation activities in the public arena. Dear Honourable Crown Counsel, Grace Ho, my humble personal conclusion is, debatable as it may be, is that Stewart is exclusively a constructive, professional, narrative observer who, for the common good of his subscribers and the public, is a positive asset to the community and Christendom at large, regardless of the spiritual immaturity, insecurities and inabilities of the Jehovah's Witnesses, who are evidently unable to cope with any competition in the public arena outside their own beguiled terms. And that's how I've finished my letter. Now, the total word count for this letter, if I may, is 5,350 words. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, at 5:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, New South Wales, Australia. wishing you all well, particularly the ex-Jehovah Witness community who is doing such a fantastic work. And I pray that this letter and this presentation impacts people to come out of that organisation from all over the world. Bye for now.
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.